Welcome back, powerful thinkers. I'm Sue Sabella, your Great Minds teacher. Let's see what we need for today. Today we'll need John Henry, an American legend, handout 30A, which is the Focusing Question Task 6 Evidence Organizer. That's the one that you completed before, and I asked you to hang on to it and keep it in a safe place. You'll also need your journal and a pencil. I'll be reviewing the focusing question task itself up on the screen. Pause here to gather what you need and just hit play when you're ready to continue. Let's read the essential question together. What was life like in the West for early Americans? How do different authors tell the story of John Henry's life? You've read two versions of John Henry. You read Keats' version and you also read Lester's version. And you compared and contrasted both versions. You did some powerful thinking about how those legends were similar or the same, and also how they were different. And you gathered that information and organized that information in your evidence organizer. Today, you'll be using that evidence to create a paragraph so you can communicate your understanding of the similarities and differences between these two incredible texts. Let's get to it. As you work on your focusing question task, I'd like you to keep this question in mind. How do I write to explain difference between texts? Before you begin writing your paragraph, you're going to be able to choose your very best points that explain the differences between these two texts. Pause here to grab handout 30A, the Focusing Question Task 6 Evidence Organizer that you've already completed. And be sure to grab your journal and pencil as well. Just hit play when you're ready to continue. Now that you have your completed evidence organizer, let's take a close look at the focusing question task. First, let's take a look at the directions. The directions tell us to write an informative paragraph to answer the focusing question. What are the differences and similarities in the two stories of John Henry? Support your response using evidence from the following texts: John Henry, an American Legend by Ezra Jack Keats, and also John Henry by Julius Lester, illustrations by Jerry Pinkney. The second part of the focusing question task is the checklist for success. And when writers use a checklist with the evidence organizer, it really helps us as a writer to form or create our paragraph in order. So let's give it a try together. Here we go. When you look at the screen, you'll notice we have the checklist for success on the left side of the screen and the evidence organizer on the right. We'll be using the checklist for success to help us create our paragraph in order. So let's start with the very first item in the checklist for success, the introduction or introductory statement. First, we need to make sure that we have an introduction with a similarity. Please check your evidence organizer to make sure that you have your introductory statement complete. Keats and Lester both wrote about John Henry. This part of the evidence organizer is the introduction. Pause here to make sure your introduction is complete and just hit play when you're ready to continue. Now let's move on to the next item in the checklist, a topic statement. For your topic statement, your sentence would read, "There are differences in how John Henry died." Check your evidence organizer to make sure your topic statement is complete. Pause here to check and/or complete, and just hit play when you're ready to continue. Now let's take a look at the next item on the checklist for success. We need to make sure that we have at least 2 clearly explained points with evidence about differences. First, you'll be taking a look at the information that you gathered for point number 1. And then I want to invite you to draw a box or circle around the strongest point that supports the topic statement. So pause here to do that work now and just hit play when you're ready to continue.
And how he died. So I can do that in the version, he was only holding one hammer, but in the Lester version, he had a hammer in each hand. Or I can compare that he took one step out of the tunnel and died, or he walked out of the tunnel, raised his arms over his head, and then fell to the ground. So I think, because if I look over here on my illustration points, it talks about the hammer in my illustrations also. So I think I'm going to do this one for the illustrations. I'm going to talk about how he was holding hammers for the illustration point, but I want to talk about this one for my other point. Okay, so I'm going to mark those. I'm going to put a box around those to say that these are the ones that I'm going to talk about in my writing.
Now I'd like you to do the same thing for point number 2. Look at the information that you gathered and select by either putting a box around it or circling your strongest point that directly supports the topic statement. Pause here to do that work now with point 2 and just hit play when you're ready to continue.
Okay, so we've already done that. So we're going to go ahead and keep working.
Now it's time to make sure that your evidence organizer has a conclusion that reminds the reader what the topic of this paragraph is. Remember, the conclusion can restate or say the topic statement again. Pause here to check your work and to make sure that you have a conclusion in your evidence organizer. Just hit play when you're ready to continue.
Okay, so let's go back. And here we have our conclusion. The two versions of John Henry show differences in how he died.
Now it's time to check your evidence organizer to make sure you've used topic-specific words, which means words that came directly from these stories. An example of a topic-specific word is hammer. That word was very important to this story, and it would be important to include in your evidence organizer. Pause here to point to other topic-specific words that you used, and just hit play when you're ready to rehearse your paragraph out loud.
Okay, so if I'm looking at my chart, I have the word hammer, and Miss Sabella just said that hammer is one of the topic-specific words. Another topic-specific word would be tunnel, because he helped to build the tunnel. Of course, John Henry, we're going to have the words John Henry in there. So those are some topic-specific words that I'm going to have in my writing.
Now let's rehearse your paragraph out loud.
Okay, and I'm going to pause it right here because I'm going to do what Miss Sabella is having us do quickly. Okay, so guys, everything that you need for your writing is right here on this page. We've already done the introduction. We've already done the topic statement. We already have our 2 points. We already have our conclusion. You're just going to say them out loud before you write them down. Okay, so here's my example. Keats and Lester wrote about the legend of John Henry. There are differences in how John Henry died. In the Keats version, John Henry took one step out of the tunnel and died. However, in the Lester version, he walked out of the tunnel, raised his arms above his head, and then fell to the ground. The illustrations in the Keats version show that John Henry was only holding one hammer in his hand, but in the Lester version, he was holding both hammers above his head. The two versions of John Henry show differences in how he died. So that's basically it, and that's what I am going to write. I'm going to go to page 92. And I already have my question written down. It says, write an informative paragraph to answer the focusing question. What are the differences and similarities in the two stories of John Henry? So now I'm going to go back and I'm going to write my introduction. Keats and Lester wrote about the legend of John Henry. Okay, and because that is my topic statement, I'm going to underline it in, I'm sorry, my introductory statement. I'm going to underline it in red. Okay, so I'm going to move on to my topic statement. There are differences in how John Henry died. It's my topic statement. So I'm going to underline it in green. Okay, now I'm going to do my first point, where it talks about how he took one step out of the tunnel and died. So I'm going to say in the Keats version, John Henry took one step out of the tunnel Now, how did it say that he died? It said that he just fell to the ground. So I'm going to put that in there. That he fell to the ground and died. Okay, but now remember I need to use that word however. In the Leicester version, he walked out of the tunnel, raised his arms over his head, then fell to the ground slowly. Remember that? Walked out of the tunnel, raised his arm above his head, then fell to the ground slowly. Okay, so all of these sentences are my first point. So all of this is going to be underlined in yellow because this is all my first point of evidence. Okay, so now I'm going to look at my second point of evidence, which is about the illustrations. Remember, in the Keats version, he's holding one hammer, and in the Leicester version, he's holding both hammers above his head. So, the illustration in the Keats version shows John Henry. Now, how was he holding his hammer? Was he holding it above his head or was he dragging it behind him? Remember that? We probably should put that in there too, because that's a big difference. So the illustration in the Keats version shows John Henry dragging one hammer behind him. The Leicester version shows him holding both hammers above his head. Okay, so all of that is my second point. So all of that's going to be underlined in blue. Okay, and so now I need to do my conclusion. The two versions of John Henry show differences in how he died. So the two versions of John Henry show differences in how he died. All right, and because that is my conclusion and it's in green, I need to underline it in green. Probably would have been smart for me to skip a lines with my writing so that I didn't overlap my writing with my lines, but maybe you could do that since I didn't. Okay, so here's my paragraph comparing the two different ways that John Henry died, the similarities and differences in these two versions of John Henry. So what you were going to do, you were going to look at your chart. Everybody's going to have the same introduction. Everybody's going to have the same topic statement. Everybody's going to have the same conclusion. The part of your paragraph that's going to be your part alone is going to be which part you decide to use. Okay, you don't have to use the same part that I used. You could talk about this or these. It's up to you. That's the part that I want you to make your own. Okay, so let's go back and actually going to fast forward through part of this. We already did all of this.
Exactly the same.
Okay, so before we finish the video, I want to go through and I want to look to see. I used John Henry. I used tunnel. I used hammer. Those are some of the topic specific words that I used in my writing. Okay, so let's finish our video.
Thank you so much for doing your very best as a writer. And I bet that you can already see just how much you're growing as a writer just since the beginning of the year. John Henry is an incredible story. Share the story of John Henry with others, and I will see you again very soon.
Okay, so that actually is the end of our lesson for today. As you can tell, I'm in the music room again. So let's go ahead and I'm going to tell you today's secret word is volleyball. Okay, today's secret word is volleyball. Make sure you add that to the comment section of today's video. So this is all that you have to do for today. You're going to take the chart on page 90 and 91, and you are going to write your own paragraph. Then what you're going to do is you're going to take a photo of your 2 pages and upload them to the Google slide that I gave to you in your assignment. Okay, so make sure that you have the introduction, topic statement, 2 pieces of evidence, and a conclusion and topic specific words. All right, and that's it. I hope you guys have a great day, and I will see you later. Bye, guys.